Favor, aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, nay. 7 of us here. Okay. Next thing is audience participation. Is there anyone from the audience that would like to address the board at this time? Okay, moving on. Next thing we have is the Best of the Best Awards, and this is one of the times that we get to recognize one of the best students in 489 and one of the best faculty members as well. So right now we have for our staff member, Mrs. Kathy Wagner, and she was nominated by Sue Rouse. So if Stu would like to come up, and Kathy.
Members of the Board of Education, guests, participants, and general public, I guess, if you're watching on TV. I was very pleased to present Kathy Wagner as a candidate for Best of the Best. Not only does she teach the senior English at the high school, she co-sponsors the student council, but she is one of those people that actually brings the community in so that they have a knowledge about what's going on at Hayes High. A lot of times when we talked about passing a bond issue, they said, oh, you know, the people who don't have kids, they don't know what's going on. They don't know how wonderful our students are and the kind of quality of education that they're receiving. Mrs. Wagner makes that happen. She started a partnership with Tammy Wellbrock from the Chamber to bring professional people in to help our students develop resumes and interview skills. This was the second year that she has done it, and we had about 50 professional people from around the community come in and interview all the seniors and the senior class. And as the office person, I was so excited, one, to see so many strong and professional people coming in. They were quality people who were doing the interviewing. And when they came back to the office to sign out, they were so excited because they had met some really awesome kids with some awesome goals. And one even commented that 3 of them were thinking about going to technical college and coming back and working in Hayes. And he was very impressed with the fact that they had made those kinds of decisions. So if people don't know what's going on in the community, it's because it goes on at the school, it's because they don't really care or don't really know or don't have an opportunity. And we're so pleased that Mrs. Wagner brings these people in. One of our interviewees was Vera Elwood, and she wrote some comments, and I'd like to have her share with you a little bit about Mrs. Wagner and her job fair.
So like she said, my name is Vera Elwood. I'm with the Hayes Public Library, and I've worked with Mrs. Wagner in a lot of different forms. I have spoken to her class with book talks, but the thing that always sticks in my mind when I think about her is the mock job fair. I got the opportunity to participate as a panelist and as an interviewer for the past 2 years in the mock job fair, and I have seen that no one demonstrates a commitment to the Hayes High mission statement of empowering all students for tomorrow's challenges quite like Mrs. Wagner does. Each year she puts in countless hours to create the mock job fair for seniors. She recruits local hiring professionals throughout the community as volunteers, works with the seniors in advance to help them prepare resumes, teach them interview skills, and talk to them about professional behavior and attire because they are required to wear full interview attire for that day of school. Then she brings it all together for multiple days of crazy scheduling to make it all work, to have job skill panels and mock interviews for every senior in the high school. This gives the seniors a chance to practice real-world skills and to network with potential future bosses in the community. As a volunteer, I got to interview dozens of seniors and sit on multiple panels, so I've seen firsthand how seriously the seniors take this exercise and how large of an impact it can have on their lives. I interviewed a student who had just landed her first job. I interviewed a student who was in the process of applying for technical school and very worried about the interview portion. I met a student who had already started her own business, and I met a student who had 8 years of working experience by his senior year because of working on his family farm, and we talked through how to translate that onto a resume. I even interviewed one student that I was so impressed by that when she emailed me a thank you note, I responded with an application to my library because I really wanted to keep her in the community. Every single student I spoke to was so prepared to leave the halls of Hayes High and represent their alma mater in the real world. And none of that preparation would have been possible without the work and dedication of Mrs. Wagner. I want to close with a quote that I got in one of the thank you notes. I received many, many thank you notes for the work that I did there from a student that really speaks to the importance of this event. She said, "I truly believe that the advice and the feedback I received and this experiment as a whole, this event as a whole, will help me in future interviews and other professional occasions." This is the kind of hard work that is truly preparing our students for the future.
I just want to say that I couldn't do this without my colleagues, Alicia Brungart and Diane Mason. They are the other two senior English teachers, and we work together as a team to make it happen. Thank you.
Got it?
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Wagner, for all you do. Our student nomination for the month is Abrienne Pence, and she is a student at Lincoln Elementary in 3rd grade and was nominated by Larissa Whitney.
Well, good evening. I'm sure every person who stands up here and presents says something along the lines of, I could be here all night saying wonderful things about this student, and I'll spare you because it's snowing outside and I'm sure you're all dreaming of your pajamas. But what a recognition that out of hundreds of students in our district that we get to celebrate one tonight, and that's Miss Avery Pence. Avery's been someone that has stood out since the beginning of the school year, especially for her selflessness and her, how can I help you, Miss Whitney? Just her overall demeanor. I have a classroom full of students who need a friend, and Avery accepts that challenge every day. I see her walking to school with her shoulders held high and she's just got this confident smile, and it's almost like she's on a mission. And I just think it's so perfect that our district's working on relationships, and that Avery, without even knowing that that's what our district is working on, accepted the challenge, and she's helping us. And she does that by seeing a need, maybe a friend that needs help, or a friend that's alone on the playground or in the classroom, or just walking with someone and encouraging them. And I just think it's pretty cool that we have someone that stands out best of the best for our classroom, especially this year. Sometimes she even has a coffee tumbler in her hand, and there are days when I'm like, do I even need to be here, because we got Avery. But I just really appreciate that about her. Another example of this that sticks out is the first week of school. My teaching partner, Julie Mohe, approached me and said, can you point out Avery? Who is Avery? You know, it's first week of school, so teachers are still kind of trying to figure out names. And so I pointed her out and I said, what's up? What do you need? She's like, I did this beginning of the year activity, kind of like a getting to know you. And one of the prompts on the getting to know you activity with her class was name someone who is one of your good friends. And she said on almost every single paper, Avery's name was listed. She's like, I gotta find out who this is. She's like a celebrity in our classroom. So I thought that was amazing that she's already a natural leader, and it was only the first week of school. and she loves others so well. So I hope that tonight, Avery, that you're soaking this all up like a sponge, and I want you to know how much we love you and that I hope you feel so loved. And honestly, we need more Abrys in our world. I could see her sitting on a panel of a board someday. I could see her being our first lady president. If that's what you wanted to do. I personally would not want that, but I could see it for you. And not only do I nominate Avery as best of the best, but I also nominate her family as best of the best. I told them I was going to be doing this tonight. First of all, Bill, Avery's dad, after one of our reading celebrations for Reader's Workshop, he called the school minutes later and said, I want to have a pizza party for your class. And that's the first in my years of teaching. I've never had a parent buy the whole classroom pizza, and that was pretty awesome because we were about to start fractions and we were working on division, so that was neat that not only could we enjoy the pizza party, but the teacher and me had to apply it to something educational. So I really appreciate that. And then not only is Bill a rock star, we also have Sarah, Avery's mom. She spent her own money, even though I offered to help. She brought in these amazing Halloween treats for our Halloween party. And she also led our class. I didn't have to teach for a whole hour, both of these moments. She led our class in 2 make and take projects. She came in and did a craft for the class for Christmas and for Valentine's Day, and it was a little ornament, and then we made little fuzzy monster things for Valentine's Day. So thank you for that. But our classroom's been blessed by this family. I'm sad that I only have a couple more months left with little Avery, but I hope that you'll come in and help with our classroom every year in some sort of capacity. So anyway, I nominated Avery at the beginning of the year, and it still holds true today. She's truly the best of the best.
Thank you to both of our winners and all those that have nominated them this month, and thank you to Gellas, Tiger Burgers, and Handyman for Hire for sponsoring the Best of the Best awards. Next, we'll move on to communications from other organizations. This includes Hayes Rec Commission, February 27, 2019, Agenda and Minutes, Early Childhood Connections Director's Report, February 25th, 2019, and Early Childhood Connections Policy Council Minutes from January 28th, 2019. Does anybody have any questions on these? Okay, seeing none, we'll go on to school spotlights.
There are a few. I'd like to point out the wrestling team. We had 6 that went to state. I want to congratulate those athletes. They ended up doing a great job at Arc City. We ended up having senior Creighton Myers, freshman Gavin Myers, freshman Gavin Nuttig, senior Logan Schulte, senior Chase Both, senior Cole Schrader, and we really were wishing them the best going on to state. We can already identify that 2 of them ended up medaling at state competition, so I also want to congratulate those 2. Freshman Gavin Myers placed 4th in the 182-pound division, and senior Logan Schulte placed 6th in the 285-pound division. So they did a wonderful job for Hayes High. We had Hayes High Science Olympiad team. They're going to go state-bound as well. They ended up placing 1st at their regional competition on February 15th. The students are coached by science teachers Lynn Zimmerman and Beth Scheel. The students will compete at state competition later this spring. I really wish them the best of luck. We have Westside teacher that was named Hayes Post Teacher of the Month, so congratulations to Angie Kreitzer. West Side program teacher for being honored as the Hayes Post Teacher of the Month. Angie is in her first year with USD 489 at West Side and was nominated by a parent of one of her students for her passion to help students succeed who face behavioral and mental health challenges. Angie is in her 5th year teaching overall and believes that focusing on building relationships has had a vast impact on her students this year. We also have the congratulations to high school senior Cordelia Isbell for receiving a DAR Good Citizen Scholarship from the Courtney Spalding chapter of the Daughters of American Revolution. Recipients were chosen based on their dependability, leadership, and patriotism.
Okay. Thank you, John. Report of the superintendent.
Had the pleasure of listening to Craig Neuenschwander and Dale Dennis last Thursday. They went over, part of their talk was on the bills that are up, legislators have put out. There's a couple that I wish to identify. One has to do with our crisis program. We had a lot of change this last year. We went to 16 crisis drills of some sort. When I say some sort, they'd be tornado, fire, and then also a variety of other crisis drills that could be possible. But 16 became quite a topic of discussion through the year, and what's being proposed is for the 16 to go to 9. That bill would change. It would be a matter of 2 tornado drills, there'd be 3 fire drills and 4 of the crisis drills. I think I was catching from Craig and Dale that they believe that it has a great chance of passing. Now, you can do more. Again, the issue here is you can do more drills. It's a matter that then that's what's required. You have to at least do those 9. I think part of it had to do with how it was affecting basically 2 drills a month is what you were having to do, and it created some discussion. The other one wasn't so much one, but the number of finance bills that are coming forward. The new governor coming in place in January, the issue there was a matter of, the presentation that she ended up making of what finance could end up being for schools this coming year. And as soon as that took place, the number of finance bills came forward. Those finance bills are quite varied. There's a number of them. And at this particular point, I'd say Deal was a little bit frustrated in being able to say what he thought at this point. He was very much wanting to have some kind of solid answer, and a month ago he felt he could do that. And at this point he's saying that it's very possible it'd be mid-April before we have really an understanding of what could happen with our budget. I can just say this, that in the scheme of things of looking them over, it could be, the range is tremendous. I mean, it really is. The range is tremendous at this point as far as what's a possibility. So those are the 2 different items that I thought I would share with you that came from that particular presentation last Thursday. But that is all I have for superintendent's report.
Next, we'll have the financial report from Keith Hall.
Okay, let's look at the capital outlay report first. My effort on this report is to make it a little more useful to you. Since this is a running total of capital outlay expenses, I'll give you the increase of each month so you know what's came through those listed accounts, and I welcome feedback on this. I know you've been doing this a while and I've changed it up a little bit, so I'll share this with you. And if you need a laser pointer at some point, one of these meetings we'll get one just so you can follow along. What I'm doing on this particular slide is, and what I'm going to tell you is I'm going to compare, it's not on the slide, but I'm comparing this month to last month so you can see what our expenses we incurred between that time. So let's look at leases in progress. The big change is in this one is we've made our second of 2 payments for the year for Hayes Middle School for the HVAC. The payment was for $150,000. You can see the next to bottom line on the HVAC year 3 of 4. The first column, which is the budget, now matches the second column within $1 anyways. I'm not sure. Can you guys see those on? Okay, some of you got them on your computer, so good. The next one is the maintenance line, which shows salaries and benefits out of capital outlay. This line moved $22,000, which is salaries. So it went from $125,793 to $147,860. Next up is buildings and grounds. We incurred $82,000 in expenses last month. We had one vendor that worked for us from July through December and decided to send it all in one invoice, and Rusty worked with him to get those separated out, and hopefully they don't do that again. And that amount to around $30,000, and these weren't issues you could plan for. These were fix on demand issues, and so it wasn't something that we could do any differently. It's just they need to bill them after they complete the work. We are also preparing to install our new lock systems on our doors. That project at this moment encumbers $19,000. We've also had $11,000 in roof repair around the district, and there's also been some curb repair in those expenditures. Transportation took possession of 2 route buses that amounted to $243,854. We bid those a while back, I'm sure. You can see that there's $60,146 left in the account, just so you can kind of follow along with me. You can see there are some other lines in this document. Next month I'll have a full report on those. I didn't investigate those thoroughly, but I'll have those ready for you next month. Questions about capital outlay? Okay. Let's talk budget summary. Okay. If you have a pen, I'd like you, as I go, write down a few notes here. I'm still getting used to this electronic format. First of all, I'd like for you to look at the general fund on the top line. If you'd scan all the way to the right, you will see 53.06. That means we have spent 53% of that account, and for this time of year, that's reasonable. But that's really the beginning of the conversation. General fund is almost all salaries. What we need to do is compare it to a year ago now to get a good look at kind of where we're at. A year ago, that percentage was 44%. That's what I'd like for you to write down, just so you have that for your notes later. So we're running 9% ahead of last year at this time of year, which amounts to about $2 million. So we spent $2 million more at the same time as compared to last year. Next, let's look at the supplemental general. That's the next line. This year, we spent 39% of that fund. Last year, it was 45.5%, so we're doing a little better. So we're ahead of last year in that fund, about $362,000 ahead, which is good. Capital outlay was 49% last year and 54% this year. We've spent $558,000 more than a year ago. And capital outlay is a little bit of a different fund than others in the fact that, general and supplemental funds are fixed in a lot of ways. With salaries, capital outlay are projects that are selected or fixed on demand, like we were talking about before. Now, then this next part is a very important piece of this, is that KSDE did our audit this week. And this is the audit that matches our prediction when we did our budget, which is always a prediction, and what our actual student count is and the weightings. When I do a budget, I budget a little high to give spending authority, and not a large amount on the high side, but just enough so you have authority. And that doesn't cost the patrons anything extra to do that, but it ensures you do not have to go through the process of republishing and streamlines the system for everyone. So we have some preliminary numbers on this sheet, and we have an idea where we are, but we need to wait for the audit results so we can just adjust our budget numbers to what they actually are and then and then that'll help us get a really clear picture where we're at this time of year. So we have to wait for that audit to be completed, and we're supposed to meet with Patty Herman next week, I think, to get the results. They send you out what they call an audited legal max, and then we'll know more. Questions about either one of those?
That 9% increase in, I just put in the general fund, that's basically just raises, is that the,
That's what I assume, yes.
because you said it was mostly
And
payroll.
added staff. I think you
added
added some
staff,
staff too.
Any more questions for Keith?
Keith, does that number project out then for the rest of the year?
When we get our audited numbers back, we'll be able to do that. We'll be able to get a pretty good idea.
But I mean, is it feasible to think that we're going to continue to be over budget, or is there things that are going to happen later in the year that might bring that back into line? Or?
Not unless we find, the only thing I could think of, and I don't think it's happened, if we have a lot more kids than we predicted to start the year. That would be the only way. Student numbers.
Yeah, because I guess technically raises would have been in the budget.
Well, and I guess I said over budget. I don't know that that's accurate. It might be, it might not, but we're just over from where we were last year.
Right.
Yeah, we're higher. Over is why you want to budget a little high, so you like I say, you have that authority.
Because we're 7 months into a 12-month year. Yeah, and considering we're January numbers were 7 months into the year, so it's 8 months in.
Almost.
Yeah.
Sure.
March,
So 53%, if we keep this rate, we'll still, what's that?
July.
Okay, so that's what I'm asking.
We're actually less than.
Okay,
There's 8 months left.
Yes.
Through January, there's 8 months left.
there's 8 months today.
8 months of payrolls.
We're not over halfway.
The majority of our staff work.
So we're not over.
Oh, yeah.
Calendar.
Different calendar, okay.
Well, Keith, I wanted to say thanks for what you've done here. It seems easier to understand and easier to read.
Good. That's what we're looking for, so thank you.
Does anyone have anything else? Okay. Since Greg made a motion last time while I was reading the consent agenda, I'm just going to go ahead and say, does anybody want to move to approve the consent agenda as presented in the...
So moved.
Second.
All right, it's been moved by Board Member Schwartz, second by Board Member Oborny. Is there any discussion? All right, all those in favor, aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, nay. Motion passes 7-0. All right, moving on to old business. We have the Hayes Middle School student device purchase.
Evening. Back tonight, we are in the replacement year with the middle school devices. We're in a 4-year cycle on them, so it'll be coming up for renewal this summer. The first thing on the, or underneath the cover sheet here, I want to point out that top line, the yellow one. So that is our when we set the 5-year budget for tech, that's what we were planning for student devices in fiscal year 20. So I wanted to highlight that out of the gate just to show where we were with that. The line underneath that does show the cost needing board approval. That is the device purchase and then case. Those are your two major costs that are over the 20,000 mark. You can see the line underneath that talks a larger total cost, but figured into those is all the software cost and the the smaller purchases that go into it. So trying to give you a view of what the total year one cost on them looks like. So not instead, just coming in and saying, here's the amount you need to approve, but then on the backside saying, well, here's all the other true cost in the device. So the devices we looked at, iPad, Chromebook, and a Windows laptop. On the device counts, you'll notice the iPad is at 680, where the Chromebook or Windows laptop were at 720. The reason behind that is this is looking at the student devices. So if you replace with iPads, the staff in that building already have an iPad, so they would continue with that device. There would be no need to try to match an instructional device for them. If you go with Chromebook or the Windows laptop, you would end up having to do that. The reason on the Chromebook would be for the touchability, but also instructional. You're going to be starting over in training teachers, so having a device in the classroom that they can see how it works and functions. The Windows laptop, the reason it would be in there for a staff device or an instructional model would be for the touchscreen. Right now, if you move away from the iPad, that leaves no touch device in the classroom. And without that, the middle school relies heavily on their Speed Grader app, which is touch oriented. Features underneath that, touchscreen, the self and world facing cameras, as well as keyboard were the major identified pieces, but trying to keep that comparable across all three devices. Underneath that, you'll see the case. The iPad had two options there. The one, the Logitech Rugged Combo 2, is a keyboard included case. The STM case is just a standard, kickstand on the back, fold over cover. I do have the iPad in case here tonight, as well as the Chromebook. I didn't know if anybody would want to see those.
I'd love to play with one.
So, what you can see on when that comes around, the case for the iPad, we show the Logitech Rugged just because that would include the keyboard in there. It is a pass-through design. It's not Bluetooth. The iPad actually slides into the case. And Luke, you're looking at it. If you pull hard enough, the keyboard comes completely off. So that does provide some functionality if the kids are out and about. They don't have to have that keyboard on there. The Chromebook and the Windows device, they would be the same case. It's in talking with other schools, it was highly recommended to us to look at investing in a case with the Chromebook. Middle school in general, they're a little rougher on the devices, so cases aren't always a bad thing. Underneath the cases, you do see warranty there. The Chromebook and Chromebook and Windows device, we did the 3-year on-site with accidental damage. That is a mimic to what we did with the high school device when we purchased it last year. There again, with the recommendation of talking to some other schools, the number of moving pieces you have with the device, the warranty and accidental damage was a recommendation that came from other schools. The iPad, you'll see, has the 3 years of Apple Care up there. It is our recommendation with the iPad not to go with the 3 years of Apple Care. The reason being on that, your upfront cost on Apple Care is about $60,000. And right now, after year 4, on 2,100 iPads, we're only about $27,000 that we've spent in repairs. So, doesn't didn't make a whole lot of sense to recommend a $60,000 warranty for only 27,000 repairs that we've done. And that's across.
Those numbers again. Sorry to interrupt.
Oh, the Apple Care warranty is 60,000. Right now, in 4 years, we've only done 27,000 in repairs, and that's on 2,100 iPads. That's looking. I mean, that's K8, the whole fleet. Otherwise, without the Apple Care, the iPad would come with a 1-year manufacturer standard warranty. The column underneath that was PIN, just to show you what a stylus cost would be. We're not recommending a stylus with any device, but just to show what those costs would be. The management piece underneath that, Jamf is something we've been using since we started the iPads 4 years ago. The cost has stayed pretty steady on that, around the $6 mark. Google, $6.25 is the management cost on that. The only note to make there, on the iPad, the $6 per device, you pay that each year. On Google, it's $25.75 per device, and you pay that all up front. So you can't split that cost out over the 4 years. On the Windows device, PDQ Deploy, that's a software we already own and use each year. Device monitoring, Apple Classroom is included in the cost of the device. Right now our staff really does heavily utilize that for the device monitoring capabilities. It allows the teacher to see what the kids are doing, but then also reports back at the end of the hour, what they spent that hour doing, what apps they were in. The comparable piece we found in the Chromebook world was the Dino. As far as when we did the Chromebook study, these next few columns here, those were the software we identified as a equivalent replacement. The Dino would function across the Chromebook or the Windows device. On PDF annotation, Notability, we've made that purchase for the devices back when we started with them. That purchase would continue to function and roll forward with the iPad, so there would be no need to replace it. Cami was the equivalent piece in the Chromebook world. That would run us $3,000 per building per year. Windows device, it'd be the OneNote. That's what we're using out at the high school. Video creation, you have iMovie. That's been a change since our last go around with Apple, but that is now included in the device cost as well. Their full production suite of apps, GarageBand, iMovie, are all included. WeVideo was the equivalent software there in both the Chromebook and Windows world. You can also see the cost there. That would be a per device per year commitment. Screen mirroring, once again with the Apple TVs, teachers really do utilize that to not only to reflect instructional material, but then also have students present their material up to the projectors. With the Chromebook, we were unable to find an equivalent wireless solution. Other schools we talked to, what they would end up doing is using the device monitoring software to monitor the student's device, plug their device in, and then show that up through the projector. So adds a little convoluity in there. On the Windows device, we would mimic the high school projector, so we'd have to end up adding a wireless dongle to each projector to do that. Professional learning needs. Right now, we've done all the upfront learning with the iPad, so we would just continue training on apps as those came out or switched around. On the Chromebook, kind of what we've gathered from other districts, it would be at minimum 2 professional days. Some were upwards of the 2 professional with 4 voluntary, and then just additional voluntary trainings throughout the year. The Windows device we listed at 1 since that's not a completely new device. Most people are familiar with the Windows realm. So what you see down underneath this, not only did we want to look at year 1 costs, I want to look at the 4-year overall cost on it. You can see the iPad with Apple or without Apple Care is the $254,320. If you include the Apple Care, you're at $314,000. Chromebook comes in at $317,612, and the Windows device at $344,071.80 is over budget, but included in there so you can see it. The other big piece of the cost, not only your total investment, but what happens at the end of those 4 years. What do we do with the device? Apple not only provided a resale on our current devices, but included what their projected resale cost based off device history would be 4 years from now. The cost you see up there are actually under. I didn't include their high end. That's the low end that they're estimating. But the iPad was shown anywhere from $60 to $80 4 years from now. The Chromebook, when talking with some other schools, retiring them after 3 years, they were selling them for the $15 to $20 mark, and that was to students, community, or to wholesale resale.
Is that the 2-in-1 devices, or is that the cheap ones that don't have the dual-facing cameras and the tablet and everything else?
It was mix. I mean, they came in anywhere from, some districts told us 10, some said 30, 40. So, Windows device would be that $40 a device as well. So that kind of, really what we want to gather out of this slide was looking at that budget amount, but then showing you not only year 1 cost, but the whole cost on it over the life of the device. That I think we'll move down into the presentation. A lot of what's in this presentation here, you've seen it before through the Chromebook study and going back to it. So we did the teacher survey back last fall to ask them when they were looking at a device, learning objectives they want to be capable of in that. So it starts, clear back the robots. There was zero interest there, but that does pick up, I should say not zero interest in robots, but that kind of picks up more in the coding aspect there. And then you can see it kind of gain on through the editing videos. And then both editing videos, but the self-facing and world-facing cameras. PDF annotation was pretty high up there. Learning management system, and then the classroom monitoring. So what we took from this survey after collecting data on the next slide starts to show the main areas that we focused, and that's where we went back to the Chromebook study and talked about those 3 areas of annotation, software, device monitoring, and then the video creation and editing. We collected that data back in November, and then based off those needs, those were the 3 key areas we looked at. We did do the study of the Chromebooks and the Google Productivity Suite. Those were already presented to you. So with that, and those 3 areas in mind, we started looking at what hardware can fit these needs, and that's where we came up with the iPad Gen 6, the Chromebook 3189 2-in-1, and then the Windows 3190 2-in-1. There again, you can see, going back to the cost slide, you have the cases with and without keyboards. I already talked about Apple Care is not recommended just because of the current repair cost at $27,000. Just doesn't make sense to spend $60,000. The 680 devices needed as teachers maintain the use of the current, and then You can see on down through the snap-on sleeve in cases, and the reasoning for the 720 on either one of those devices. Software considerations that we put in, looking at the annotation software, the iPads already had Notability. On that, we've spent about $2,300, and that's for the licensing we already own on those. Chromebooks, there again, you're back to you'd be looking at $3,000 per building per year. Device monitoring, the Apple Classroom's included, whereas Chromebooks, you're talking Dino at the $6 a device per year plus the one-time activation fee. Video creation and editing, the iPads come with the iMovie included in the cost, and WeVideo is the equivalent replacement at $4.30 per device per year. Next slide, it does show, we just included the pie chart off the survey. We did survey middle school staff to see, after presented information on devices, which one they'd prefer to fit their instructional needs in the classroom. As you can see, 86% had listed the iPad. I think 10% were the Windows laptop, and we had the rest at the Chromebook. Considerations for recommendation on this. Obviously, the Windows laptop comes in over budget. That's just the plain and simple on it. The iPad fits within the budget. It leaves more room to address student needs elsewhere in the district. The K8 iPad repair costs, we've been over that. At $60,000, it just does not make sense to purchase AppleCare when we're only spending $27,000. Wireless projection opportunities, hit on that's available with the iPad and the Windows device, but could not find anything equivalent in the Chromebook world. Continuity of processes and staff, that's a big one. Data showed the iPad preferred, but with what they're already doing in the class, it continues pretty seamlessly. There are some software costs for the Chromebooks. You saw it in there that are an annual cost to the district as compared to the iPads that are non-recurring. And then the other big piece was the professional learning hours. There's been a lot of time already invested in the iPads and the related apps. So, I guess I should say, included there at the end, you can see this. We attached the list of districts that we reached out to, what device they were using. Not everybody got back to us, but tried to include a rotation schedule. The takeaway from that, at least on the Chromebook side, a lot of them looked at going a 3-year rotation, and that doesn't fit in with our 4-year plan. But we should kind of try to show a mix of both Chromebooks and iPads. There is actually, I think, one school in there that's Windows based. So lots of information. Yes, any questions on it?
First, I want to say thanks for the good report you put together. It does provide a lot of information for us to look at. It'll definitely help us make a decision. I appreciate the hard work from your team.
Is there a timetable when you're needing a decision by? I always know sooner than later. I always know that.
Yeah. So, I've talked with John about it. If we have the purchase, obviously we want to get in ahead of the rush of other schools placing their end of year orders. So, if we've got devices, last summer was pretty comfortable where we had them in hand. I think it was about mid-June, because that gave us time to go through the devices on top of everything else we have to do in the summer. So.
But the bids are valid for.
Oh, excuse me. Sorry. Yes.
Okay.
I was just 60 days on them.
I know this has probably been brought up at some point, but the extent of the information you provided tonight, I wouldn't necessarily consider old business. I would consider it new business since it's the first time that we've seen all of the facts that you put in front of us. So,
I mean, I'm gonna ask, so I mean, like, we approved it at the first April meeting, second April meeting, does that timeline fit?
I was hoping to get it approved in March,
March.
just so we could start getting the wheels
Second meeting in
going.
March?
Yeah. Yeah.
One of my questions was the difference in devices for the teachers.
Yes.
There's roughly 40. Is there, in our comprehensive plan, is there a plan that we already had in place for replacing teacher devices?
Yes.
And what was the time frame on that? Was it 4 years as well, or was it something?
5 years on staff devices, so we're on year 2 with middle school right
So
now.
effectively, if we went with the iPads again, we'd be looking at replacing their devices next year in our normal rotation?
Yeah. With their iPads, the thought there would be we run those to the end.
Okay.
I would like to get those in a spot where they would rotate out with the laptop, because I know that's been a conversation in the past, and every year that divide between what the iPad does and what a laptop does is just getting smaller and smaller. So, we can get them to fall out on the same rotation. That'd be nice.
can you remind me again, so we're looking at replacing the middle school devices this year,
Mm-hmm.
and K, what in the elementary?
Next year, the plan accounts for 3.5,
3.5?
and then the year after that would be K2.
Okay, and so this is all in 20, right? Fiscal year
Yes.
20?
Yeah.
Okay, and then what at the high school?
The high school would be the year after that.
So there's nothing for the high school in 20?
No. So, all we're looking at right now is the middle school.
Okay,
Next year, at this time, we'd be talking 3.5. The year after that, K2.
okay,
The year after that would
Okay.
be the high school again.
Okay.
So
that's what I was...
where you get the 4-year.
Okay,
rotation.
gotcha.
The only hiccup I could see potentially coming would be the K2 devices. And that just is, by the time we get to that point, there'll be 6 years of use on those devices, and whether or not Apple will still be supporting updates at that point. Right now, they still got the update this year, so we're, play it year by year and see how we go with that. But that would be the only hiccup I could see coming in that plan. And really the only way to avoid that would have been to start this 1 year sooner, and we didn't want to do that. So
Okay. What other questions does everyone have for Scott so that we are prepared in March to make a decision?
Go ahead. Paul?
You mentioned over the 4-year period, we had 27,000 repairs.
Mhm.
Where did you pull that?
So that was going back. We've had 3 vendors do our repairs over the last 4 years, so just going back and pulling all the repair costs from those vendors.
Okay. So what fund were you pulling out of? Since we want, because we have 27,000, we might expect the same for
Mhm.
us in the next 4 years if we want that. So
I think that was
how is
just
that budgeted for?
that just comes out of there's a Keith, you might help me with this. I believe that's out of my general fund repair line.
Okay.
I don't think it's I don't know if it's capital outlay repair. I will find the answer to that and be sure on that.
Yeah, I'm not sure, Scott.
Yeah, I'm just kind of curious because though it's a savings, it makes a difference in what
Mhm.
about the fund. I was wondering about these. What's the lead time for failures in this particular case? I was kind of surprised I pulled it. I was able to separate the keyboard. I didn't expect it to come apart quite that easily.
Yeah.
It's fixed again, so don't
Yeah.
worry about that. But what is the failure rate on those? Because we're buying it for 4 years. These look like they maybe could last the gumdrop cases.
Mhm.
What about the longer than that?
Right now, Logitech's that's their second iteration of that
Okay,
case.
so it's not the second
No,
iteration.
yeah. The first case, what they kind of learned from that, the first case, the keys would pull off. So if you look at that one, it's all an integrated keyboard. So
Yeah.
tried to learn from some of the damages and what kids like to do with it when they sit there and fidget with the device. It has no internal battery to it. Over the course of a day, I think they project it has a net impact of 2 to 3% on the battery life of the device, just having that keyboard on there and using it. So not a large one. And like I said, with the keyboard coming off, the kids can still go out, And I've, I know, at least I think at the middle school, that provides just another piece, but we would have processes in place to deal with and identify each case and keyboard. So we'd make sure that kids, what case would go out is the case that they keep. And even if a whole class takes keyboards off, I'm confident that we can have them identified in a way that they're not going to get mixed up or lost.
Okay, that won't become frisbees.
Huh?
That would likely be great frisbees.
Yeah.
Be there. All right, so you don't, but is there a manufacturer, one-year manufacturer, or,
Mhm.
because I'm sure for the second iteration, I would like to hope it'd be better, but in terms of, I'd hate to be buying new cases.
We've talked to, Russell uses that case. I want to say Hugoton was the other school district. And honestly, everybody I've talked to at either district has had great things to say about it. I mean, the fact that I think Hugoton's actually replacing some of theirs ahead of schedule just so they can get that new keyboard on there.
Yeah, and I do have to say that keyboard is something that came out as being wanted from it.
Yeah, that was a need that was identified.
Thank you.
Scott, I have just a couple of questions here. You had talked about a little bit about the device monitoring. I'm curious, did you check, is this list here just a group of schools you just kind of went out and found here as far as the ones that are on here, or?
We tried to identify schools close to our size, but also it was a little more difficult to do this, but try to find not so many of the Wichita or Kansas City schools, try to find somebody that's equivalent to us.
Do we know what they were using for the device monitoring at these other schools? I guess part of the thing I guess that I struggle with a little bit is just looking at this list. I mean, you're looking at 15 of the 23 of them are using Chromebooks. Why? I guess that's probably one of my biggest questions, is because I know we just went through with superintendents interviewing, and I think 3 of the 4 of them, their districts were using them, and if there was a big price discrepancy or the difference in there, you would think, I know we're not the only district that struggles with cost, so I'm just curious, what are they doing differently that we're not seeing? And maybe you guys have already reached out to them to find out what they do with the device monitoring or some of that stuff. I guess I'm just curious what I'm missing, I guess, is a good way to put it.
We actually had a few districts that don't, but would like to, but cost was a piece that restricted that. Some of them are in year 1 or year 2 of the device and haven't quite got dialed in what I guess their exact need is on it, kind of rolling as they go. We identified that need just because we've had that time with the iPad.
And I was just curious what the, I'm sure there's some of them that are in their first year. I just didn't know what overall, if there's other ones out there that some of them are using. And like I said, obviously when you start adding, at $6 a pop or whatever per that, it adds up. So it's just I got to believe that other schools are in our predicament as well, as far as, trying to find any place we can to save money. So that's the only reason I'm just kind of curious on some of that. Another question I have is dealing with the case, and I know you made the comment on a couple of them that I guess my first question is, are we using cases at the high school on those laptops?
We're not.
Okay. But they're still saying, even with the 3-year accidental, they're still recommending cases with the laptops?
A lot of the schools are with that middle school crowd. Just a little rougher on the device.
Gotcha. And on one of the other line items we had, or that you had on there, was where's it at here? The Wii video. Do we need that on every single iPad in the school? Every single student does video editing?
For certain projects, depending on class, I can't speak totally to that, but I would imagine science and.
I'm just curious. I just didn't know if it was something that every single student had to have video editing software. So I didn't realize, I guess, that every student took a video editing class or had to use them. So.
Well, just looking at what iMovie does and trying to find the equivalent in that. That's where we ended up with Wii Video, and even reaching out to like TMP here in town, that's what they use on the device.
Gotcha.
Don't they have a free version?
They do have a free version, but in looking at it and talking to some of the schools that use it, there is a limiting factors in the free version over what we're currently getting out of iMovie, trying to find that equivalent.
Just a question on,
Mm-hmm.
looking at the base price for the iPads, like $350 for what you have here, and then the Chromebooks are $370.90. Has that changed over time, that we had it converted the other way? I mean, we're saying the Chromebooks are
So-
a little bit more, about $20 more.
Yes, so in the Chromebook, I guess, world of things, over, I'd say, probably the last year and a half, there's starting to been an uptick in costs again. So there was quite the drop even 2 years ago, but each manufacturer was trying to, undersell the next manufacturer. And it got to a point where the bottom kind of dropped out on them, and nobody was making money. So there was an uptick around it again. Even a low-end base model, you're still back in around that $200 to $220 mark right now. So where you're seeing the cost come in there is included in that 3-year warranty, but then touchscreen and trying to step up in tier on devices. We talked to Great Bend was one I know right off the top of my head. They buy the top end in I think they're running Acer, but they buy the top end of that model, and they're at $350 that they're spending a device, and they're on a 3-year rotation with it. So.
What, to add to that, I guess a little bit in looking through, I didn't see it, maybe I'm overlooking it, but did any of these schools that you reached out to or that got back to you, did they share other than like the one you just mentioned as far as what devices, which Chromebooks they were using?
Some
Were
did.
they just the standard laptops? Were they 2-in-1s? What's the vast majority of schools using?
Some were 2-in-1s. A lot were no frills base model. Opens, close, turns on, turns off.
Okay.
But in trying to identify one that's equivalent, it's hard to find a base model like that fits what we're already doing.
So the touchscreen capacity was, I mean, you're doing it to compare here, I get that, but that has functionality within the classroom that's made use of enough to justify that additional cost.
I mean, right now that's the only way to do it because that's the only way you can interact with an iPad.
Yeah.
But I guess that's my question as well.
To me, the functionality
Right.
of keyboards is the classroom cost. I mean, in terms of its use in the classroom, is the touchscreen a central element? I mean, by adding this keyboard with the thing, you brought up about equipment cost. So that's what I'm kind of asking. I mean, if we looked, it's just a laptop that has a keyboard, then the cost would be lower. So, and maybe somebody could speak to that. So is the function what is driving this, or just to be sure we get the same as an iPad?
Yes.
Tell me
Sure.
how. Elaborate on that.
Maureen, I don't know if there's more you can pull from the instructional side on it. Yeah.
That's what I'm asking.
Most places don't.
Currently, a lot of what is done with the touchscreen revolves around distribution and recollection of work. So a teacher distributes something in Canvas, and then students take it over to the Notability app that they currently use, write on it in some way, do a graphic organizer, jot down their thoughts in whatever method is asked by the teacher, and then it's collected again with Canvas. I hate to guess at how many times a day that occurs, but I would say it's in almost every class every day.
And
Tom?
the only way to do that is via touchscreen? I guess that's what I'm trying to get clarification on.
So typing on a paper and writing on a paper, of course, are accomplishing different things.
Sure.
So, yeah, I mean, the annotation feature of that is a big piece of, I'm already doing that, but trying to continue that over onto another device as well.
Other than that feature, what else is the touchscreen used for?
that's the big one. I'm sure there's, pieces of certain classes, science, that maybe utilize that more than, a language arts class.
And Marie, that's the PDF annotation stuff you're talking about? Okay.
Do you think maybe that's something we could email the teachers tomorrow and just ask them a question and get some feedback and then just send it to the board? I mean, we're not deciding on this until whenever, but I'm just wondering if that's a case by case. Because I mean, like, I think it was language arts, well, I don't think they're gonna use that much, but maybe a science or math might use it a lot more. So I think maybe it's just, you guys are both very qualified.
Although-
I'm wondering if we're asking the wrong people tonight.
Language-
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
I mean,
And we're happy to collect further data from teachers.
and I didn't mean to make
Arts
it sound like more
uses-
work for you either. I'm just thinking, are we asking the wrong people the question here? I mean, are we gonna have teachers watching this at home or watching this tomorrow going, oh, they should have said this, and, and I guess I'd like to hear that, to make sure we're making the right choice. So. And I don't know that it has to be another presentation as much as just just that simple question. It's like, hey, we're questioning whether we need a touch screen. Tell me what you're using it for. Are you using it in your class? Are you using it in your classroom, and what are you using it for? And put it on a spreadsheet and
Scott,
send it to us. And
we have this device monitoring software. Can't it tell us that?
With,
Well, we have device management and device monitoring software. Doesn't it tell us how often the machines are on and in use and what apps they're using?
with the Apple Classroom, it does, but it doesn't generate back to a central repository for us. It just generates a local report for that teacher to kind of summarize how that hour went. But I don't think that it's not keeping track of touch or anything, or I guess it just reports back, student A was in Notability for 30 minutes out of the hour and in Safari for the rest of it.
But the Notability app was the only, that you can use it without touch, but the whole purpose of that app is touch, right?
Yeah, the annotation, that's big.
And I appreciate the fact, as far as you guys looking into that and finding the other one. Like I said, at the end of the day, I'm just merely just trying to look as far as from cost standpoint and look into this. And like I said, that's probably the biggest part I've struggled with, and especially even seeing this list, is I know most of these other districts are not using touch, and how, I guess I'm just trying to see how are they getting around it, and I'm sure there's advantages, pros and cons both ways. I don't know what those are. I haven't researched it, but that's kind of the reason I'm asking on some of those. So.
Okay.
And maybe a question to help me is, how long has Chrome, the 2-in-1, been out on the market and used in schools? Because I wonder if some of the Chromebooks they may have are legacy or they were too pricey at that point. But so how long is this particular?
That particular 3189, that's
Last year.
I think that's been at least a year.
So it's maybe the idea of a 2-1 capacity, the touchscreen for the Chrome has been.
It wasn't there at the four.
sorry.
Yeah, it hasn't. It wasn't prevalent. I think even 2-3 years ago, the cost it just outweighed the benefit there.
Yeah.
But as the software or the hardware costs have started to come down on it.
Yeah, because that then makes the numbers. So we're looking at Chromebooks. We really don't know if they're 3 years in. They may not have even considered this at that point.
Yep.
Just something to consider, but
Yep.
I shouldn't do anything. But I am interested, sorry, I'm trying to take out a board member. But I am interested in what the rest of us are, is what are the reasons that touch is such a vital need, or if it is or if it isn't, and trying to establish that, what's its use, in addition to just annotation for reading purposes, but what other uses are there? Is it like animation, if that happens, if we're using video, or does it come out?
And I think some of that, annotation, but even into creation of various projects. Video editing, drag drop functionality, PowerPoint's ability to interact and, mold with those objects that are on the screen.
But I think we want to hear that.
Yep.
Or at least get a sense of the usage of that. Because part of the direction from the board was to identify the functions that are essential or needed, or you've identified as being relevant for the education of our students, to be sure that we're getting the best, the best learning possibility with them. And then from that, we'll look at the devices that are most relevant. So I do think you need to answer that part with from the teachers, a little more data about why that touch is an essential functionality. Because at that point, it may be, well, we want the iPad, but, okay, we'll throw this one up here. But if it's because we want that feature, and the iPad and the 2+1 here, and then the PCs, then that's an apples to apples comparison. Otherwise, it's still an apples to orange.
Yep.
Okay? I think at least, I don't know, is that what the other folks are asking?
I'm curious if it does have some of that, but we can get more.
It's not just what you want, but it's what you're using, is what I think we want to do. And that ties back into the bigger question that you brought up here, is the professional learning days. That is a true cost that is essential, not to mention the momentum moving forward, that has to be considered and that has to be considered as a real cost to put it in there. But if it's something we're not using, then I guess where it comes to.
I do. This says the device my students use to master learning objectives must be capable of. So the way it was worded, I think it is being used. Are you saying?
I think capable of, but what's the actual use? Because I can check all the things that I want, but if I'm not using them, then it
Right,
really
but
doesn't make sense.
PDF annotation, and PDF annotation is marked, Shanna, if you'll highlight that. 19 teachers said it was required to meet their daily learning objectives.
That's not what your question says. It says this device my students use to master must be capable of. That doesn't tell me that what they're using. That tells me if they wish. Those are two different questions. And I think you need to be clear on what you're looking for.
If I might elaborate, I think, and maybe this isn't what you're saying, but does it have to have this, or is this something that we want it to have? Is that?
That's really where it's at. I mean, capable, but what you've told me isn't what your question asks.
Get clarification.
One other question. Are we going to have, if we go with the iPads, will we have any dollars we spend on professional learning hours in any way related to the Apples or the iPads?
We would I might be misspeaking on this, but since most of that upfront learning has happened, really what we've been doing with that has been all voluntary. If a new app comes out, Maria will have a session that teachers can, I've got time on my calendar, or she'll go into buildings and do that training, but it's voluntary for them to come to that.
Because to clarify the learning days and the amounts, I don't know that you talked about this, you figured out we pay curriculum, pay $15 an hour, so for staff to attend 1 or 2 days, that would be in addition to what we already have built into the calendar, because the professional days are built into the calendar, take care of a lot of initiatives we have. So based on the feedback we've received and looking at it, these would be in addition, whereas the iPad, since we're familiar, would be integrated into what we already have. If that helps clarify how the dollars were figured, that's correct, right?
Sophia, did you have a question?
If we went with the Chromebooks, we currently pay for volume licensing from Microsoft, correct?
Correct. There's we do pay Microsoft each year, but that's for, I guess, I should let you ask your question first.
Well, that was the question. Are we paying the volume licensing, and what does that include?
Our cost that we pay to Microsoft each year, that's for our servers. The CAL licensing on that is a good chunk of it. SQL Server. There's the piece outside of that, the Office portion. That's in our 365 agreement, but that's free to education. So we're not,
So we don't have any cost with them other than for our servers?
just our Cal and, can't think of the terminology right off the top of my head, but yeah, it's all back end related, nothing front end student device.
You listed that there's no stylus, but didn't we have to get stylus for the high school computers or the new machines?
We gave them, with the Surface, they did have a pen on there, the Surface stylus. What we gave them this year was the Paper-Made Inkjoy pen that has the little stylus tip on it.
But if we didn't have that, I mean, on the iPads, are they writing with their fingers or?
Some are, I think, some, yeah.
Sophia had a
Those
question.
are the ones you guys said you just went with the, instead of like the active ones that the Surface used, you just use like a piece of plastic basically?
Are they?
Gotcha.
Sophia has a
Yeah.
question.
Since touchscreen is desirable by teachers, are these other two, they're not touchscreen?
No, those both
No,
are.
everything is.
Okay, so everything out there is.
Yes.
They are. I think
So it
the
wasn't
question is,
an
if
issue
they
of
weren't,
one.
then-
Yeah, there's cheaper models of the Chromebook that are not touchscreen.
And the one we got for the high school is touchscreen.
The
Yes.
Surfaces are.
I just have some, I don't have any questions, but I just have some comments to the board or something to keep in mind. And I don't want to add anything to Keith's workload, but I kind of went back and I've brought these numbers up before, but in the time since we started the one-to-one initiative at the high school to now, I think we've spent probably in the neighborhood of $15 to $20 million on technology, all of it coming out of the capital outlay fund. And you know, the next item on our agenda is to look at the bond issue, and you know, when you're looking at, if I'm right and it's $20 million, that's an elementary school. And so you could have had an elementary school that's still here and still around, as we're seeing most of our stuff last 3 years and is worth between $10 and $60. And so it really has zero value. Now, there were educational uses for that, and hopefully the students learned and got some benefits back out of that, but you know, I'm still waiting for that study that we can show that it definitively proves that our investment into technology is paying back dividends. But I just think it's a lot of money we've spent, and the question is, how do we measure its effective use? And you know, the other question is, I'd really like to know is, are these other districts paying for all their technology out of their capital outlay as well?
Are we able to do that under another fund bill? That's true.
Does anybody else have any other questions or comments regarding this?
I just wanted to, I thank you for the presentation. I mean, I like this particular slide right there. I know we've kind of been asking for that, and that's probably the most helpful as far as that side-by-side comparison of exactly what those costs are and everything else. And I know it's something we asked you guys to do, and I appreciate it. It's the best way to process the information. So, thank you.
You're welcome.
Thanks, Scott.
You're welcome.
I do know that we have a meeting next Monday. Again, there's not a gap. So I don't know if you guys, I'm going to be gone. So, so if you guys are wanting to vote on this next week, or if Scott needs more time to answer a few of these questions and get back with the teachers and things like that to the following meeting, which would be after spring break, correct? Yeah.
I prefer to wait till not next week, the week after.
Okay.
Is that okay for you, Scott, from a time standpoint?
Yeah.
Okay. If anybody thinks of anything else for Scott, make sure you get it to him before the 25th meeting. Okay? Thank you, Scott.
Anybody want to look at those? Are you done?
On the prices?
Oh,
Yeah, I was playing with one.
you better take them before Paul breaks it.
Those already broken ones.
There were gifts.
All right, moving on to the board bond work review.
Yeah, a couple meetings back, we were given a presentation, kind of going back 7 months, given an idea of what was talked about at that time. It was kind of pointed and more specific, but one thing that was not shared that I think needs to be shared before we have that open discussion is one of the items that was discussed by the board was trying to gather the information as to who voted, who the first vote that we had when we had the $90-some million bond election, and then the $70-some million bond election, who were the voters. And in that process, part of this is a matter of identifying that the significant number or the significant grouping that was voting was not showing up to be necessarily a percentage of teachers or parents of kids that are going to the public schools here. So identifying that, and it ended up being, some of our discussion was, then it's the public in general, the community. And with that community, identifying how do we put together a bond that then is not, it's not a matter of saying we don't want to listen to the teachers. It's not a matter of saying we don't want to listen to the parents, but definitely we better listen to those that are voting. And part of that discussion was saying, okay, 2 different projects that were pretty comprehensive in nature in that whole process. Is that seemingly something that's realistic? And the votes would indicate maybe not. So in the work that was done in the discussions, if you look at the cut down kind of project in this process, it definitely is. It's not necessarily from the standpoint of wanting to ignore other facilities or other problems that exist, but just a matter that in this particular way, it may be something that then individuals in the community, which again, that's the significant grouping that are voting. And I think we did talk about, in all realism, when we go to, because it's not a matter if, when, it could be a year, it could be months, it could be 10 years, but whenever there is another bond election, the issue is there's great likelihood it's going to be the same grouping of people that's going to vote once again. So I don't think that was explained the last time. It wasn't necessarily the intent of just throwing out and ignoring other needs that exist in the district. It's just simply saying there's only so much that can be done, and is this perhaps a project that could set the stage for something or several different possibilities in the near future. So I really think at this point it was intended to be, because after that presentation there really was no discussion. And at this particular point, more a matter of discussion from the board as to what were the thoughts of it, what might you want to do at this, what's the direction at this point for the board. And I guess there are 3 major ideas. One has to do with the addition of the lunchroom, at the middle school. So the middle school is touched, the HVAC system at the high school, and then the other was really completely redoing Roosevelt, adding on to it and renovating that particular building. Those were, you can simplify it by those are the 3 different items that were talked about.
So this would take care of our projected elementary school needs if we move on with the Roosevelt.
When you say project, yes.
Yeah.
But it also is more a matter of, unto itself, it doesn't answer the elementary needs, because we have concerns. I'm not going to ignore it. There are concerns at Wilson. There's concerns at O'Laughlin.
And are those concerns there ones that, and this comes to a finance question, that if we look out 5 years in the capital outlay or our reallocation of funds, is it possible to address some of those to keep them functional until we could get a larger bond? Or
Yes. Well, one way to consider this is the amount of money that would be tended to with HVAC at the high school is tremendous, and that would not be coming out of capital outlay. The other is looking at Roosevelt when we have concerns of roof, of plumbing. Roosevelt has concerns with its HVAC system. It needs to be replaced as well. But those are things that would be taken care of by a bond that then would not have to be addressed by the capital. If you were able to walk away from another building, not just in what's been already happened with Washington and Munger, but also walk away from Lincoln Elementary, once again, you end up having buildings that have existing needs, but be able to say, we're not going to put money into those buildings and they can be redirected. So you have Roosevelt, you have the HVAC system at the high school, you have Washington, and you have Munger capital needs that have to be, or have had to be considered. That can all be redirected, and in all likelihood, the direction would be in those particular buildings because they have the greater need, O'Laughlin and Wilson. At this point, there are needs at the high school as well, but I'm saying we identified the elementaries as the area that has the greatest need.
Okay. Well, I know personally I prefer a whole new high school, but that's off the table, so we won't go there. But with that money, and I guess this is where I'd like, if we can, a projection is that, say we pull out the $6.7 million that we will have to spend at the HVAC upgrades in high school. What's that going to buy us in repair work in the other buildings in the district that wouldn't be affected by this particular bond plan? I guess because you've said that we will save money potentially with Roosevelt and the HVAC. Oh, is that another $6 million? Is that like $5? You know, are we freeing up over the next 5 to 6 years that we, you know, because Rusty does a good job of projecting out. Here's my 5-year plan of repair work. Here's the physical plan we have to do. I guess what would help me to, and maybe help the public to understand, is that if you allow us to do this, then we're actually, we're going to make a big difference out of the high school, but one bond issue is going to help us over the next 5 or 6 years as we put that money, roll that money into the plan, take care of that school and that school. Because you're right, it's not just this work. It's the work to the whole physical plan of the district, but I don't really have a good sense of what that looks like.
Right.
How does that roll out, which comes back to some of what we've talked about what's our long-range planning. As I said, Rusty has done a very good job of projecting some things of where we might be doing, but I think that would help me to better understand the impact of this bond on the total of all our buildings.
And I think what you're speaking of, Paul, is in November of 2016, we ended up working on that, of identifying, actually, we had several different companies come in, and we actually selected. We didn't go ahead and follow through in hiring them, but we did select them of doing that particular project, of coming in and actually doing that work, but it was really put on hold at that point. We didn't follow through in hiring them.
Yeah, and we had some discussion about longer-term planning. I don't even remember. I remember us voting on it and doing it, but then we froze because we put our emphasis and our dollars towards, well, let's wait till we get a bond issue.
And what came from that too was that was even prior to the $78 million bond. So we didn't do that. We then went into a project or process of identifying what would a bond election look like, and we ran with that. And I wouldn't say we forgot about it. I'm just saying it became, if the bond would have passed, the other probably didn't have as much functionality. I mean, it truly would have been different. And part of that too was a matter of saying it sure would have looked different as far as them coming in, and perhaps much less expensive of what their project would be when they went through that.
And I do remember it being pushed back to say, well, we did do the work on that, but we're going to move forward with the bond issue. And I understand why we moved it off the table. Is it something we should try to bring back to maximize? We only have, and we have a finite amount of funds that we can do, and we have a finite amount that the public will support. But I think we have to be able to say, give us this here to take care of these big projects, but we'll be able to take care of many things. So it's really getting a nice magnification, but I need that plan. And maybe you need to bring that back, although I know it's all dated. But it was part of I understand.
Well, dated, it was never done, so you can't say it was dated.
I mean, the bid is dated and done.
Oh, okay, I see what you're saying there, yeah.
But if it would help us be able to determine where the allocation, I mean, like you said, we're going to be able to put some money through a bond issue to repair, but how would we use the money that we're going to, that we're not really getting anymore, but better to be able to better allocate that in the highest priority order over the next 5 years or 10 years while we're working on a bond that may be a 10 to 15-year bond, depending on getting to that $10 target mark that people asked for.
Sure.
That being the critical measure, the reason we're downscaling is because that's what we've heard.
Well, and there's two parts to that. I agree completely. The issue of Rusty's work, which I'm glad you're complimentary of him, because I do think he does a great job in trying to look at it. The list of items that need to be done because of our facilities is long. And the issues about prioritizing that, and he tries in talking with me and others as far as what that prioritization should be. He would love to have someone who's more of an expert in that process of doing that instead of just, somewhat it being on his shoulders. The issue there ends up being that sometimes we end up having our best intentions in prioritizing that. For instance, we're focusing right now on the high school HVAC system, okay? About everybody that's looking at their systems would end up saying that is correct. Even the company that we were looking at a couple years ago was identifying that makes sense. They also would say that Roosevelt's system is in great need. The one thing we never know is you can have that catastrophic piece that breaks, and basically all of a sudden we're talking all about the high school's HVAC system. We could turn around in 3 months and all of our efforts is towards Roosevelt because of their particular, their system. And that's the piece that we never know. What a bond election provides, and if I can say, it doesn't matter. In this case, it doesn't have to be a comprehensive. No matter what the bond election is, a bond election allows you to take some of that off of the table and allows you to refocus that capital outlay money and be much more concerted, much more exact in what you're trying to do instead of feeling like you're just never catching up. You can take care of some of your worst case scenarios with your needs and basically feel like you're really getting somewhere with that. The other piece in our talking about a bond election was to be able to do a project that then sets a stage for near future. We talked a lot about that 7-8 months ago. We ended up in our conversations saying that the realism is it very well it could be that we just have to have a smaller bond. Set the stage, do the things that we really feel we have to, and then basically have perhaps a plan that's in place for, if it's 10 years from now, to end up having another step in this. You said high school. You'd love to have a new high. I know, but we've talked about that. That was brought up 7-8 months ago too.
I know.
So now some people would say that's a pipe dream. But at the same time, if you look at how things, if you're looking at the chess pieces of our facilities and how things would move with that one item, sure there'd be other renovation, but you could really, this district would completely be changed by something like that, just moving the other pieces around. And it's one building. But again, we say it's a pipe dream because we know completely what that cost would be. It'd be tremendous, But it's odd when we say that because a couple of years ago we were saying that even in my office when I first stepped in a couple of years ago, there was that drawing, architectural drawing that was Well, at that time, it was 15 years old, and 15 years old, it had the drawing of a middle school and a high school out on that property. So it's not a new idea. This is actually, I think you could go back to when the high school was built in '80. I have the belief that even at that time, that extra property was probably there with that idea. This has been an idea for probably 40 years of having some consideration for the future in that regard.
Yeah. And I'll say the thing about this fund, which forget about particular buildings, is that it takes care of some of the highest priority needs we have to do. And whether we move things physically around or do something with another volunteer, it doesn't matter. We have to take care of the physical building that we now call the high school. We have to get the HVAC. We need to take care of the needs of the Roosevelt or it. So the plan in place looks good. Just give me also an idea of where we'll realize the money that we would have put to the high school. Where can we tell people that you help us with
Very
this,
good.
you're going to help us. You're not just doing one project. That vote is actually several projects.
Okay, and I follow what you're saying, how this one project can affect all the others, yeah.
And in that longer term plan, because all ships rise with this one, everything's going to rise as a result of this, but we need to be able to tell people what that means.
And I don't know in the last couple of weeks, because I have only, I think, Paul, you're the one person who shared that you did get some feedback from the public. I don't know, I think one other board member said they were contacted too, but I don't know.
Well,
if you've had any contact with people in the public.
That's my question, along with the long-range planning requests and impacts of that. I don't know how many people sit and watch our board meetings. It's not something I would do if I didn't have to be here. So my question or my point to that is, we need to somehow get this proposal vocalized to the public and see if there is support to something like this, because we always get accused of not listening to the public. And so we do need to I feel that's the next step. If we feel like this is a plan that meets the needs and fits into our long-range plan, is that we need to vocalize it to the public and see if there is the support of this plan versus the other ones that we've already failed at.
And I want to say, Mandy, I was not, even though it looked like a proposal, it wasn't.
It's just an idea.
I know.
The idea.
I know. It was intended to be really kind of a review that's packaged.
Right.
But I guess what I'm wanting to know from the board, if the board does feel that that package was solid enough to put out there to see what the public wants, we can do that.
I don't think it is until we have Paul's question answered.
Okay, we can do that.
And to take it a step further, to what Mandy said, as far as, getting some of that, I guess that would be my next question too, because I know that was one of the things that was harped upon after the last time was, with the surveys and everything else that were done and where people felt, and I think Paul touched on it a little bit, at 150,000, which is where they kind of said the median was, I think it's 154, 155 for Ellis County, we're still at $16.32, which is still higher than what the survey said people would support.
Well, that's at 10 years.
Well,
yeah.
But they also didn't want the 30-year.
They didn't want the longer one though either.
Right.
So.
Well, I know, but 15-year did fit within that 10 to 15. I mean, it did. Yeah. But again, you're right.
I guess that's just the thing, because I don't want to come back. We've already said, we didn't support it for this because it was higher than what we had. And if that's the case, do we need to look at? And again, I realize we're just floating things out there right now, but.
Well, now the other piece that I'd share is the one thing that I liked about this presentation was it identified two areas that really, not as much discussion about the HVAC system at the high school, because it's going to have to be done. I mean, it's happening. But the middle school's issue of the cafeteria, people who go visit will say it's justified. I mean, it truly needs to be bigger. Okay, it's more a matter of identifying $1 million to end up having that kind of construction project. The issue would be more Roosevelt. The issue is saying, well, does Roosevelt need all that, or does it just need a new HVAC system? Does it just need, just do the things that, put a new roof on it, which actually we're kind of planning for this next year, but put a roof on it, put put the HVAC system, identify the things we do. We don't really need to get rid of Lincoln at this time. Continue with Lincoln, just do. And the answer would be this: yes, you can do that. Okay? The difference with this project is it takes that step to the next level. The step is basically changing a facility, which is our newest facility for elementary. It's 50 years old, but it's our newest. And changing it into a facility that has a future and adds on to it and allows us to walk away from a 90-some-year-old building, which we have openly said we're trying not to commit more money into that facility. Openly, we're saying that. It's hard to do that, but at the same time, it does make financial sense if you're looking for future. So, yeah, you can do two ways. You can do a bond for really just take the things that, like HVAC systems, well, we don't need but things, roofing, many of those projects. But are we going to do it to buildings that in not so long, a year, 2 years from now, it could be you, or it could be basically a whole new board that's going to be looking at it again and saying, oh, no, we're going to end up, we're going to walk away from this building. Now, if that's the case, I hate to end up using any money. I hate to think of putting $300,000, $500,000 into a building that then 3 years from now, a new group of individuals would say it's not future for Hayes, and we're going to go with a different plan at that time. And I hate to look at it that way altogether, but it just seems that financially we would do that ourselves, I think. There are times when you live in a home long enough that you end up saying, is it worth the money to dump this much money into it, or do you look for a new home? I mean, we gave the example of a car 7 months ago. We used that, and we used that car example quite a bit. But you can use it as your own home, because we are in that spot sometimes. You live in a home for 20, 30 years. You start sometimes at some point say, do we want to update it, or do we just want to end up building a new home or finding a new home at that point? So that's what I see as being the difference between these two. A bond election can be just to go out and fix things up. The difference with this one is it does fix up, but it also sets that one step up of trying to end up looking to the future.
So I guess what I'd like to see coming forward is...
What you asked can be done. And
that would include, what's the cost realization? And I would say, at my age, 50 looks pretty young, John. Just no comment. But I think we have to look at the full implication in the package of what it does.
Very good.
Because I don't know for sure, but it may come out by the time we run the numbers that we're going to end up spending money, but we're going to be able to get every bit of improvement that we need to out of the money how we choose to spend the money.
Okay, then I would suggest that this not be on the agenda for this coming Monday.
Well, we had, we've had a couple of people bring up the idea of long-range planning and how this fits into it, and I'm just curious, where is our long-range plan, and where can I see it, and then where do I direct people to go look at it? Because to my knowledge, we don't have one.
Well, the long-range plan, we just were talking on. In 16, we were working towards that. We ended up identifying a group to actually do that, and we put them on hold. We didn't go ahead and hire them for that. Now they are still, I am sure they would be delighted if I would contact them and just see where they're at with this and see if there's still an interest since they were selected. But that can be done.
I understand, but we asked to have that on the agenda, and we haven't had it on the agenda yet to look at long-range planning. But to talk about this plan specifically, before I made a motion to table the discussion of the bond until January, we were talking around the issue of 2 elementary schools, and we had the presentation from the Wilson principal earlier this year about the concept of 2 elementary schools, allowing us to have either a K through 2 or 3 attendance center, and then the balance, whatever that would be, or to have 2 K through 5. But whichever way it went, this ties into some of what Paul's asking for, and what we've asked for previously was, what are the cost savings for those things if we do those? How does that, because just telling people we need something new, I mean, most people are smarter than that to say, well, why? And we can't go out and sell that to them because we don't know the numbers that would have, or that would save. And so if we're looking at a K through 2 or 3, and it may not all be numbers, it may not all be savings, it may be that we're going to be able to put a better product out there. And I mean, there's a lot of things I can sell to people as to either a 2 elementary system, whether it be all in one and 2 different attendance centers, or the other way, but the cost savings are there. What that percentage would be, I don't know, but we know, or we did know what Atchison saved when they went to 1 attendance center. And so I think those are some of the things we look at. And if that's something that this board thinks is the long-range plan for this district, then I don't think this plan here meets those needs. You know, the high school or the middle school cafeteria and the HVAC, those aren't, you know, assuming those buildings stay in, are going to be needed. But the Roosevelt doesn't make any sense to me, because my understanding is we needed 12 or 13 sections. Well, if you have 12 or 13 sections, and Roosevelt is going to be one of 2 elementary schools, and it has 5 now, that leaves us 7 or 8 short. Or I mean, 2 to 3 short. And to me, if you're going to add on to a building, you would do it all at once instead of 2 separate phases, because it's not going to be cheaper the second time to add it on than it would be to do it today. And if you don't do it, you may not do it later, and then you've got the problem of, you know, and it was talked about whether it be the middle school or another school, but if the middle school is the other elementary school, the question would be is how many sections will that support? And if it's not an equal number, then you've got a problem. You know, if you do 2 attendance centers, no, but if you have a choice between, you know, if you did need 12 or 13, that means you're going to have either 7 or 8 sections at another building. And if that's the case, you're going to have parents trying to choose, well, do I send my kids to this 8-section school or a 5-section? And that creates problems that I don't think we want to deal with. So I think there's a lot of problems with this idea, and I think part of it is that we don't, it's saying, yes, we're doing something, but it's doing something without a plan for steps 2 and 3. And I know that you brought up the idea that if we do that, well, then you could have this voter say, we're not going to do it because we don't like steps 2 and 3, or maybe we just don't like step 3. But I think if we're just throwing out bonds without a plan, we're going to get the same results we've always gotten.
Does anyone else have any questions or requests? Okay.
I guess maybe one request, could you bring back part of what we had heard about the physical plan that we tabled, we never followed through with the group that we had done, because not everybody's aware of that, and I think that's...
Sure. I'm aware, but not probably the same depth you are. I know what you're talking about.
Yeah. And I think there is some real merit to that decision about how many buildings we want for elementary, because that may shift the plan totally. I mean, you may say, let's put the effort one way or another. I mean, no doubt that whatever we go, the middle school cafeteria it's a jungle, man. It's a tight space. And in the high school, of course, there's no problem. So,
Sure.
you know, those things aren't going away and will have to be addressed immediately. But the other thought is, whether we take care of those physical plants, the actual destination of those buildings are for, so is, I think, really the question, what's the trajectory for the next 10, 15, 20 years in terms of where we move children to?
Okay. Very good. I'd say probably nothing for the next meeting, maybe the one at the end of March, and definitely, if not that, then the first one in April.
Yeah. Okay.
Well,
Thank
I
you.
do appreciate you pushing us to move forward. I mean,
Well,
you're not letting it rest.
well, the issue there ends up being, a good number of the board members that are present have been involved in a process of trying to do this. A change in administration, my position, a change in board members coming into this next year possibly, is one of those that does it reset everything? Do we start all over again? And the advantages of starting over again, I would say that they're going to be addressed with the same issues, the same problems. That's not going to change. So for me not to push you would be irresponsible on my part. It's one of those that basically a decision at some point needs to be made. And the issue there ends up being, and maybe Roosevelt's not the answer, the solution, but talking about 5 sections there, that's true. But 6 sections is easy to do as well in that location. It's just a matter that the transfer, if you end up, it was a clean transfer when we were talking, again, not made up, talked about 7 months ago was Lincoln has 2 sections. 2 sections move over to another building. That makes 5. You add 6 or 7 to it, you'd have possibly some building that's not being used for a while. So it's more a matter of just, was this a plan based upon something intended for the future? Yes. Identifying that and having it laid out as a long-range plan that we're going to do this, and our plan is 10 years from now do this, and have that. There are districts that do that. But I dare say that the districts that do that and are successful with that are the districts that are growing. Big districts, Goddard, Mays, Kansas City, the districts that actually are growing and they know that's the case, they put these together. I am not aware of districts such as Hayes or others that end up having this kind of concerted plan over a 20-year period. They deal with what they can while they can, and they have groups of people that are willing to back it and do it at that particular time. And they do as much as they can at that given time. The issue of trying to put together a big plan is definitely fantastic. But at some particular point, some group of people are going to have to start.
Okay. All right. We will move on to the designation of negotiating agents. I know during our last discussions that we had seemingly reach a consensus that we would move forward with Mike, Lance, and Keith being our agents for the 2019-2020 contract. John and would be going, helping as we transition, and Bill will be called in, or Michael, as needed. Since then, Sophia has expressed an interest, and I talked with her briefly today. I think it's great that you want to do it, and I think unless everybody else has a difference of opinion, I think the 3 that we have is how we want to move forward, but we do need a motion for that tonight. And I know you signed up for the training, and I encourage you to do that too, because the more training you can get beforehand, the better you're going to be. So.
Yeah, I think there was just a little miscommunication when we last talked, because we had talked about the possibility of being the 3 of us or 2, and then I thought I was left with the decision to think about it for a while. So I did. I thought about it, and I would like to be on the negotiations team.
Well, I'm going to make a motion to approve who we had. If somebody has a different idea, I think we need to go back into executive session to handle that. But I would move that we have the Executive Director of Finance and Support Services, Lance Bickle, and Mike Walker serve as the board's negotiating agents for the 2019-2020 contract year.
Do I have a second?
Second the motion.
Okay.
Discuss it.
It's been moved and seconded. As Greg mentioned if we need to have any further discussion, probably need to do that in executive session. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay.
How much time do you think, Mandy?
10 minutes.
Say 5-10 minutes maybe?
Yeah.
Can I take a bathroom?
Yes. All right, so at this time, let me make sure I get my language right here. I move the Board of Education recess to executive session under the following exemption to the Kansas Open Meetings Act pursuant to the employer-employee negotiations exemption to discuss the negotiating team, and we will resume here at 8:35.
Mandy?
Yes.
Was that motion superintendent? It wasn't John Thisson, was it?
No.
It should be superintendent. Because once I leave, the superintendent would still be in that function.
No,
No, we're just talking about,
they're talking executive session.
executive session,
Right.
but for negotiation aid, not,
I know I wasn't listed in it, but you ended up saying you would expect me to be present.
You'd just be there to assist.
Right. You would have the same expectation of the new superintendent.
yes. Okay, do I have a second?
Second.
Okay, all those in favor? Aye. I'm sorry, what?
Oh,
Oh, I'm sorry, just the Board of Education. Sorry, Michael.
Oh, yep.
Sorry, Paul.
that's good. I was going to walk out anyway, so. So thank you.
Your vocabulary really is very fitting.
You know, I felt fine until about like yesterday. And it just hit hard last night. Fine most of the afternoon until I got here.
It's cold in this room. We're just discussing that. It's very cold in here.
Oh, I hope so too. Got too much work to do. Sick.
But you can sure use that. Dragging out the dogs.
Maybe say hi to my man.
It's good to see you.
Yeah.
I heard tell you might not be.
Well, I.
May I say, you provide comfort to me here. Thank you for being
He's going to be as needed basis as well as the attorney. As a, nope. So do you have a motion? Those opposed, nay. Motion passes 7-0. Moving on to new business, administrative contracts. The board will review the administrative contracts for building level certified administrators for the 2019-2020 school year. When were the contract, or when were the staff evaluated? Sorry. Say if evaluations are complete, I don't understand why we can't move it up. And that may be the reason why it's a later time to have that. It's just a matter of the way it is at this time.
seen as far as having those on here, but in the personnel transactions. Well, we approved personnel transactions earlier up in the deal, and if you scroll down under personnel transactions, the contract renewals for all those people are listed in personnel transactions.
And this is new business to me.
So if you scroll down. So all of those people are listed under contract renewals under personnel transactions, which we just approved. But then this is a separate deal here. So I guess I'm a little confused as to why that's on there.
I'm approving the contracts tonight, so is it?
It's written in transactions as contracts. Now maybe the actual contract presented or approved the transaction.
All right. I think Keith was secretly trying to he's like cutting the fat. All right. The next thing is the 2019-2020 school year calendar. In all honesty, I'm not